What kind of secrets do you keep from your family and why? What would happen if they found out, and are you prepared to handle that situation when it arises? The stakes may vary from person to person, but the Perfect Pear asks us these same questions, as well as gives us some examples of what can happen, and so much more to unpack. I can understand that there's a lot of reasons for this. For example, I don't want to have to spend an evening explaining what a brony is to my family. But even with such minor stakes, this is a double-edged sword, with consequences ranging from none at all to potentially permanently harming the trust that you have with your family. Now imagine if the stakes are higher, like they were for Bright Mac and Pear Butter. Grandpa and Granny Smith were so caught up in their pride and rivalry that they had no way of knowing the magnitude of relationship between their children. Then, when Grandpa decided to move, everyone was forced into a position where life-changing decisions that should involve months of planning were cut down to a mere impulse. This is how Grandpa showed us what not to do. This is what happens when you don't communicate with your family. This is what happens when you put your pride over everything else. Like Grandpa, you become blinded by anger and often direct that anger at those who are closest to you. Ask yourself if this is something that you've done with a family or friend in your life. Ask yourself, how long has it been since you last spoke to that person? Was it worth it? Most people who have been in Grandpa's position say that it wasn't. Conversely, you can avoid doing this to others by asking yourself if you've ever been in Pear Butter's shoes. What kind of position did the selfish pride of others put you in? For Pear Butter, it was a rejection of family, a situation that oftentimes in real life leaves people with no lines of support, potentially making the hardship impossible to recover from. Thankfully for her, this is where Granny Smith showed us the right thing to do. That once the chips were down, Granny was able to understand Bright Mac's feelings and accept the fact that the Pear family was now part of her family too. Granny Smith also showed us exactly how fast you can forgive, accept, and love a perceived enemy. This, like most other things, is a choice that comes from an understanding that regardless of whether or not you're blood related, everyone you know is a person, much like yourself, who needs love in order to survive. Of course, none of that needed to happen. Although we have no way of knowing what would have happened if everybody did the right thing, I can confidently say that there's a chance things would have been different if Bright Mac and Pear Butter were open with their families early on in their relationship. A situation specific to whatever you might be living through right now involves a lot of personal factors that I can't account for or advise on in a video. But what I can do is tell you what I have observed about 90% of the time in real life. Frankly, it sucks at first. The families will hate each other even more at the start. There will be lots of resistance and possibly even sabotage. There will be a lack of trust. But if you can persist, then eventually they'll be forced to start accepting it. The more the change becomes part of their lives, the harder it is to actively push back against it. And soon enough, it'll be like it was part of their lives the whole time. The other 10% of the time involve truly dangerous situations with abusive family dynamics. Remember to do a lot of introspection and try your best to communicate openly. If you truly believe you're in danger, then it's best to seek help and remove yourself from the situation entirely. I promise you, there are always resources available to help get you out safely. Bright Mac and Pear Butter demonstrated another virtue that is extremely important: persistence. When they realized that they were meant to be together, they did everything they could to stay together. They knew their love for each other was worth keeping, but in order to keep it, they had to fight for it. Even at the risk of losing everything else, it would have been worth it in the end if it meant that they could keep each other. Bright Mac understood that a life without his other half might not be worth living, and Pear Butter needed him just as much. The reason that Christians read Corinthians 13 at weddings is to reinforce this concept. Love suffers long and is kind. This means that we're willing to do everything in our power to make a good life for our spouse. That means biting through all the hardships and loss and sacrifice that life inevitably brings with it as an equal team. Through true love, where you found your other half. Even the worst times of your life can be happy and comforting with each other. Then, by the time we get to the words, "Until death do us part," we are not exaggerating. The Perfect Pear is an amazing episode because it gives us so much to learn from and aspire to. It shows the long-term effects of holding on to your anger and pride, how to seek forgiveness, how to cast aside prejudice, how to welcome new family, and the importance of trust and honest communication with our families for apples and pears alike. It shows us that family can be found just as much as it can be born into, and that love is worth fighting for as long as you're both fighting. It shows that family is precious and makes life worth living, and that small seeds from different origins can grow together into a giant, very fruitful tree. Apparently both metaphorically and literally. I don't doubt that as the years went on, Bright Mac and Pear Butter had their share of challenges. And eventually, one of those challenges was too great for their bodies, as it will be for all people. But it was the love that they had for each other that allowed their children to become the great people that they are and save the world multiple times over, even if Bright Mac and Pear Butter weren't around themselves to see it. If we're honest with our families, introspective with ourselves, and willing to do whatever it takes to foster love for our spouses, offspring, and families extending to the entire world, then maybe we can do the same. And that's the moral of the story. If you have any comments, critiques, or suggestions, you can send me a message by following BrawnyBuck on Tumblr or sending an email to bronydebates@gmail.com. This video was supported by all of my generous backers on Patreon, especially Princess Heather Blossom, Kyle Christensen, Shady Oak Ministries, Stephen A. Wilson, Emerald Spencer, Wreck, Bootleg Bard, Rein-Kun, DJ Skywalker, Sodden Girder, Sid McConroy, Autoknight, Princess Sunshine Sparkle, Senko, Jennan Kellogg, and the Equestrian City Heroverse series. Be sure to check out all of their content links in the description. You can also see how you can join them in supporting my channel and what you would get in return. Have a great day, and I look forward to hearing from all of you soon.